So good afternoon again, and welcome back to the third session today, where we're looking at our South African PGM assets. I dare say it's such a cliche to refer to a phoenix, but just thinking back 5 years ago, so many of these assets had largely been written off by the market. And I think today we will show you that in the form they are today and what we have achieved with these assets, these will really underpin a leading business as we move forward with our PGM assets for a long time to come. Again, I'd ask you please to consider the safe harbor statement. There are several forward-looking statements in the presentation. Thank you. So just to kick off with, on a high level, the location of our assets and operations in Southern Africa. The big base of our operations are, of course, the Western Limb in the Rustenburg area. That is where our three big operating mines sit, in Rustenburg, Kroondal, Marikana, and of course they all have surface operations. In the Eastern Limb, we have two operations that are on care and maintenance, being the Limpopo or Baobab operation and Blue Ridge, and we have several greenfields projects as well. In the Northern Limb, we have the Akanani project. That sits in between Ivanplats and Mogalakwena. And then we have a 50% shareholding in Mimosa that is operated independently in Zimbabwe. So a good spread across Southern Africa. I think critically, and this is really the slide, I indicated to you when we started our last presentation that when we got into PGMs, we were asked why. And there were three answers to that. One was understanding the PGM markets. One was the fact that we were comfortable with PGM mining insofar as it was narrow tabular ore bodies, very similar to where we had achieved some significant success in our gold business by applying a new operating model to those mines. But the third aspect was we recognized the opportunity for consolidation in PGMs. Many of our operating team had been through the years of consolidation in the gold industry, where, quite honestly, without consolidation, it would have been questionable whether or not that industry would have survived. Putting operations, putting companies together does provide the ability to cut costs, and that enhances the overall sustainability of the operations. And that was fundamental to our entry into PGMs. And when we look at the slide in front of us, what we see is a set of assets where 5 years ago we would have been looking at three independent companies. We had Kroondal, or the Aquarius company, the Kroondal operations. Contiguous to that was the Rustenburg Platinum mines, owned by Anglo Platinum, and adjacent to that, the Marikana operations, owned by Lodman. So effectively what we had on the slide was three companies. That means three management teams, three sets of overhead costs, three different ways of operating, three sets of surface infrastructure, three completely different approaches. But when we look at the slide, what we have is one ore body. Technically two in terms of the UG2 and Merensky, but practically one continuous 60-kilometer ore body. And the way to optimize value through that is by treating it, planning it, mining it as one ore body. And by being able to put these together, we have been able to demonstrate the value of that quite successfully. Thank you. So the best way to demonstrate this is through the synergies that we have already achieved. At our Rustenburg and Kroondal operations, we achieved over R1 billion of synergies per year within the first year of integrating those two operations. Subsequently, of course, we have acquired the Marikana operations, and in under 2 years, we've been able to realize almost R2 billion in synergies from the integration of those operations. I dare say that these synergies have largely been realized through the application of our operating model and the shaving of overhead costs and operating structures, and that there is still significant value to come through the proper optimization of mine planning by dropping mine boundaries, as well as sharing surface infrastructure, including depositional capacity. And that is certainly something that we are continuing to work on, and I think will still bring a lot of value in the years to come and the not so distant future. I think the other important point to make is that so often the concept of synergies is seen just with job cuts. However, the realization of these synergies ultimately resulted in the preservation of over 12,500 jobs at our Rustenburg operations that would have been lost had this not been realized. At Marikana to date, we have already managed to preserve just under 3,000 jobs that would have been lost had these synergies not been realized. So in total, that 15,000 jobs and almost 150,000 lives and livelihoods which have been impacted through the successful integration of these operations. Of course, as we know, we have experienced a windfall in terms of PGM prices, but I dare say even without that increase in prices, the realization of these synergies would have moved all of these operations from the red back into the black, even if prices had not moved. And that was the value of the strategy we undertook. Particularly pleasing has been the integration of Marikana into the company. Over the last 24 months, we have managed to realize a 12% nominal operating unit cost achievement. In real terms, that is more than 20% that we have managed to reduce our unit operating costs by. And that is with a 14% decrease in total production output. Essentially, this has been a process of streamlining operating models, of removing unprofitable ounces, of focusing production in areas where it counts the most, getting efficient, and overall integrating this into our broader business. This has been a real success story on how integration and realization of synergies with a focus on your core operating model can make a significant change to the sustainability of an overall operation, and one we are very pleased to have in our stable. Of course, what this has meant to the company as a whole is that where we started off very much on the right-hand side of the cost curve, and previously Neil would have shown you a cost curve that included capital. This is a cost curve just looking at our cash costs. But where we had a business very much on the right-hand side of the curve, and I dare say a perception that still exists today, but the realization of these synergies and embedding that into our operating practices has meant that this is now firmly a second and third quartile business, very firmly sitting in that position. And as I mentioned, with the ongoing realization of the longer-term synergies achieved through optimal mine planning, through optimizing surface infrastructure, and through the benefits of the capital investment that we're making now starting to come through, I dare say that we'll see ourselves continuing to move down this cost curve, but a very competitive position relative to many of our peers. I think the second perception about these assets that we often hear and are discussed is the fact that they are short life. And I'd like to just share with you some numbers in the next few slides. And firstly, just to point out the fact that we have a resource base within our South African PGM operation, or Southern African PGM operations, of over 350 million ounces. That compares to a reserve base of only 46. And critically, that 350 million ounces, the vast majority of that actually sits within brownfields projects adjacent to our existing operations. These are not greenfield projects that require significant new capital, new permitting, new processing facilities. This is within our existing operational base and provides a significant amount of upside to the life of our operations. I dare say the perception of the short life may well have come from ourselves. At the time that we did these acquisitions, we had to be very clear that it was at a time of depressed markets, depressed PGM prices, and that trying to justify capital expenditure at that time and at those prices was very difficult. As a result, we had to make sure that our acquisitions could be underpinned by shorter life of mines that did not require significant capital investment. That had to underpin our fundamental thesis of the acquisition costs we paid. And as a result, those are the life of mines that we shared with the market. I dare say that even looking at this slide, it's still a 20-year life, but it is a declining profile. We have subsequently launched and commenced with projects of K4 and Klipfontein, which adds a little bit of life, but overall a declining profile. And I guess that is what has underpinned the perception of shorter life assets. However, if we take the resource base that we have, and looking at the next slide, what we can see is that we've been able to identify just within our current operating environment, some 20 projects that includes over 100 million ounces of potential reserves. 20 million projects that are in our pipeline, 3 of which that have been through a feasibility study and 2 have been approved for capital expenditure. But looking at the other 20 projects, barring 3 of those, being Akanani, Blue Ridge, and Baobab, the balance are all brownfields to our existing operations. If we take just 5 of these projects, and on the next slide, we'll demonstrate that just 5 of these 20 provide us with the ability to sustain our current profile for more than 20 years. That is just 5 out of 20. We have a significant resource base of which we can sustain these operations. As I mentioned, these are brownfields projects, low risk, can leverage off existing infrastructure, have the processing capacity in place. But certainly at the time, we do not have a concern with a resource base to grow, but rather strategically, when is the right time to be investing in these resources for our company and for the markets that we serve. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Dawie van Aswegen, who will take us through the details of these operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dawie van Aswegen, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the South African PGM segment. Our segment employs 48,500 employees, both own employees as well as contractors. The South African PGM leadership brings about years of experience in different fields of mining, and I would like to introduce the members. Norman Nkumalu, Senior Vice President and Head of Human Resources. Roderick Mokovani, Senior Vice President and Head of Finance. Kevin Robinson, Senior Vice President, Technical and Service Operations. Floyd Masamula, Senior Vice President and Head of our Rustenburg Operations. Bongikosi Nkulunga, Senior Vice President and Head of Mining for our Kroondal operations. And lastly, Johan Klein, Senior Vice President and Head of Mining of our Marikana operations. The good safety record of the 3 integrated entities was maintained throughout the various integrations, with a stable safety performance being sustained. Our care values are fully embraced and incorporated into all levels of the segment, which in turn forms the base of our group Zero Harm strategic framework. The South African PGM segment also ascribes to the ICMM principles, of which Sibanye-Stillwater is a member of. The cultural transformation process is currently being rolled out across the South African PGM segment. The focus of this process is in support of the empowered people pillar within our Zero Harm strategic framework. The South African PGM embraced the real risk reduction protocols, which are a set of rules designed as minimum requirements in 16 key processes across all our operations. All risk assessments, standards, procedures, and training material are being revised to ensure that all protocol requirements are fully embedded. Leading indicators are increasingly being utilized within all levels of our segment. This assists us in proactively focusing on high-risk activities and workplaces, and is cross-pollinated by lagging indicators, taking agencies and behaviors into account. Our safety strategy is fully rolled out across all our operations within the segment. The South African PGM segment embarked on a full ISO 14000 and 45001 integrated accreditation and certification process during 2021. Our Marikana operations and Rustenburg and Kroondal mining operations have recently been certified, and we envisage that the complete SA PGM segment will be certified within Q4 2021. The ICMM reporting principles were also adopted, and the South African PGM is recording the total recordable injury frequency rate as a new KPI since the start of 2021. As a segment, we also have achieved some significant milestones during 2021, with our PGM process operations recording 13 million fatal-free shifts, Marikana mining operations recording 3 million fatal free shifts, and the combined South African PGM segment in the excess of 4 million fatal free shifts. The underground ounces profile depicted in this graph is based on the 2020 life of mine reserve and resource plan, and also assumes attributable 50% from production from our Kroondal and Mimosa operations. The lower cost K4 and Klipfontein open pit projects, which were approved in Q1 2021, are included, and it maintains a consistent profile. None of the previous mentioned project studies are included in this process, which brings further upside and extension to the profile within the South African PGM segment. The all-in sustaining cost is influenced by royalty assumptions. The reserve price for the 2020 life of mine calculations were based on the 3-year trailing metal prices. Included in the cost is the synergies that emanated from previous integrations of Kroondal, Rustenburg, and Marikana into Sibanye-Stillwater, and that equates to about 2.8 billion rand. NERSA guidance was followed for future electricity tariffs, and also does not include any upside potential from our strategic energy sourcing projects. Our surface operations are long life assets, which comprise of the Marikana bulk tailing treatment, the Eastern tailing treatment, the Rustenburg Western limb tailing treatment plant, and Platinum Mall, from which we acquired full ownership in July 2021 from a previous 91.7% stake. Improved methods were introduced within our surface mining areas, which resulted in safer, more efficient operations. Testing of flotation technologies to recover ultrafine chrome is currently being piloted, with early indications being very successful and can contribute significantly towards our chrome production in the future. Our current surface operations are forecasted to end in 2027. However, current expansion opportunities are being assessed across the SA PGM footprint, which can extend the profile. The average operating cost is just below 110 Rand a tonne, with our all-in sustaining cost benefiting from our byproduct credits. Due to the homogeneous nature of our ore body and mining mix across the 60-kilometer strike distance, no material differences with regards to head grade are seen within our profile. This also brings about consistent recoveries, and further changes with regards to our operating strategy can optimize future returns, thus ensuring a stable production profile as indicated previously. Our stay-in-business capital expenditure is estimated at between 8% and 12% respectively for our conventional and TMM operations operating cost, which excludes electricity cost and supports our production profile. Our stay-in-business capital includes initiatives that support safe operations, infrastructure upgrades, ESG compliance, TMM replacements at our Kroondal operation and Rustenburg's Batupele mine, as well as our continuous ore reserve development at our conventional operations. The total capital expenditure also includes our growth capital of 4 billion for K4 shaft and 66 million for the establishment of our Klipfontein open pit mine that is due to commence in Q4 2021. Also to note is that the current planned capital expenditure excludes any of the unapproved projects as discussed earlier. Our base metal output is supporting our 2020 life of mine profile, and significant quantities of base metals are produced. Through the existing metallurgical process, nickel and copper as primary base metals also support the bigger Sibanye-Stillwater strategy. Our world-class concentrating facilities have got adequate capacity and flexibility to treat both underground, including K4 material and surface material, and is supported by suitable tailing storage facilities to embed our ESG strategy. Throughout continuous optimization, which included design enhancements, improved monitoring, and the implementation and adoption of industry best practices, we have seen a substantial improvement on the reliability of our furnaces. We are currently operating below the required SO2 legal limits as prescribed by the South African legislation. Our smelter capacity is also aligned with our ore blend and support our 2020 life of mine profile, inclusive of K4 shaft. Potential creation of additional value through optimizing and increasing throughput capacity at our BMR and PMR, which are currently running at 50%, exist and is aligned with future opportunities. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll now hand over to David Kowarski.
Thank you, Davy. Hello, everyone. I'm David Kowarski, Senior Vice President of Chrome. Firstly, for those who don't know it, chrome is the ingredient in stainless steel that provides stainless steel with its corrosion-resistant qualities. Without chrome, there's no stainless steel. Sibanye-Stillwater has a total of 9 standalone chrome plants and are all at the back end of our PGM concentrators. Mining costs are not allocated to the plants, and the biggest costs incurred are logistic costs to China. Despite Transnet's poor performance, we are meeting our scheduled vessel bookings by trucking part of our production to Richards Bay, which is our primary export port. In 2021, we will receive full economic value on about 800,000 tonnes per annum. This includes an increase of 90,000 tonnes per annum after the expiry of the Sibanye contract at the end of 2020. The balance of our production is subject to legacy agreements that yield below full economic value. Since their acquisition, there have been good production increases at the Rustenburg and Kroondal plants. Now a few words on the proposed chrome export tax. Together with other UG2 and primary chrome producers, we are opposing a proposed tax on the export of chrome ore. The tax is designed to assist South African ferrochrome producers by increasing the input cost of the Chinese ferrochrome producers. The South African chrome industry employs more people than the South African ferrochrome industry, 10,800 people or 70,000 direct and indirect jobs versus 6,900 jobs in the South African ferrochrome industry. Based on detailed economic research, we are of the strong opinion that a tax will result in a net loss of jobs and South Africa will be worse off. The only way to assure the viability of South African ferrochrome producers is to lower their cost of electricity that has increased by 500% since 2008. South Africa's electricity cost is far higher than China and higher than India and Kazakhstan, who are South Africa's other ferrochrome competitors. Lastly, chrome is well positioned to add meaningful value to our PGM business, and we continue to strive for greater operational efficiencies that we will achieve. I now hand over to Roderick. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. My name is Roderick Mugowani, the SVP Finance for the SA PGM segment. I am responsible for the finance at the segment level. Looking at the slides on the finances side, the first slide shows basically the SA PGM operating cost breakdown. How it has been, cost has been broken down. The total breakdown in operating costs for the SA PGM consists of labor costs, contractors' costs, utilities, stores and consumables, sundries, which is actually including the rehab costs, toll charges at the Rustenburg operations and overheads. However, it is actually excluding the third-party purchases at the Marikana operations. And if you look at the pie chart there, 50% of the operating cost is made up of labor cost and contractors, which is largely driven by the wage agreements. Stores and material costs constitute 25% of the operating costs, and includes normal consumables and TMM maintenance costs, and still actually costs that is actually related to the plant costs and explosives, underground support, and chemicals, to mention the few. And all these costs are actually, as we speak, above the inflation parameters, as in, you know that now they've actually gone up year on year. Utilities in the segment constitutes 9% of the total basket of operating costs, and is mainly derived from the increases as guided by NERSA. This year, the average increase year on year was 12% as per the guideline, which is 7% above the inflation parameter. The overheads costs for the segments constitute 5% of the total operating costs, and it actually consists of the group charges and the on-mine charges inside the operations. Bear in mind that now the segment carries 68% of the group charge as a whole. We do have some projects that within our segment that we are running to actually reduce costs, like for instance, the Fit for Growth projects, which is in line with our procurement or contractors reduction of a spend. We targeted around, say, 800 million rand for the group. And our portion for the segment is basically sitting at 415 million rand. So that is the Fit for Growth initiatives that we are actually running there. And then one other sort of like footprint reduction projects that are actually getting done at the segment under the leadership of Ralph, our VP Engineering. If I go basically to the breakdown of costs in line with our operations, you could see that in the operations as we've got it there, Rustenburg operations are semi-mechanized, and they've got actually the conventional portion as compared to Marikana, which is fully conventional. And Marikana has got a downstream processing plants. Krondal are 100% mechanized. Having said that, Marikana being a conventional operation will reflect higher labor and the consumables at 43% and 28% respectively, mainly due to the downstream processing plants for smelters, PMR and PMR. You will notice that now in Rustenburg operations, we do have 11% tolling charges and which is associated to the Anglo offtake agreement for smelting and refining, which is also part of the cost that Rustenburg operation actually carries. Krondal operation being a mechanized operations, they are quite actually efficient with less employees, on average around, say, 5,200 employees producing 113 tons per employee, comparable to conventional operations producing at around, say, 41 tons per employee. So hence the operations in Krondal, they are reflecting a lower percentage of labor cost as compared to other operations on the conventional side. If you look at the pie chart, you will actually notice that 4% of the operating cost in the segment are associated to the running expense of chrome plants and the transportation of chrome from basically the mine to market. And then the next slide shows basically how the breakdown between the fixed and variable costs. From the segment point of view, you could see that now the split is 55% fixed on the costs and 45% variable. However, we should look at the mechanized shafts that are carrying lower percentage than the conventional shafts. I mean, you recall that now the underground conventional shafts have extensive infrastructure to maintain, hence their fixed costs are actually higher than the mechanized. The Krondal mechanized operations are less expensive by nature as comparable to conventional due to low intensive labor costs and contractors' costs alike. The fixed costs mainly consist of labor costs, electricity and overheads, and contractors, which is basically across the operations in line with all the operations costs base. However, the variable costs are linked to production output, such as stores, incentives, and overtime shifts. And that, in a nutshell, gives us more flexibility of running these assets, as in you have got mechanized operations with lower sort of like costs, and conventional being actually the high intensive kind of labor, and then that flexibility started to actually kick in. So looking at the next slide, it actually gives you an indication of the definition of our all-in sustaining cost rand per ounce. In this case, I will be excluding the third-party purchases at Marikana. And in looking at the definition itself, which was developed by the World Gold Council and generally adopted by the industry on the gold sector, to ensure the consistency and the comparable reporting of costs. Therefore, the segment, as in the SAPGM, has also adopted such reporting standards as best practice. When you look at the graph as presented, you'll see that now included in the calculation of the all-in sustaining costs is the credits derived from the sale of byproducts such as nickel, copper, iridium, and ruthenium, which is linked to the average market prices. Royalty, for that matter, if you look at the graph, was basically significant and had a very significant impact in the all-in sustaining cost, and it is actually deemed as an uncontrollable cost, as it's driven by the market prices as well. And if you look at the graph, continuously going to your actually end of the graph at the end, the all-in sustaining cost for H1, you could see that now for the segment in H1, the segment reported just below 17,000 rand per ounce, as the cost that has been reported, and that is actually out there in the market. And if we exclude the third-party purchases, Marikana was sitting at around, say, 17,700 rand per 4E ounce, and then Rustenburg operations sitting at 18,000 rand per 4E ounce, and Krondal actually sitting at 12,000 rand per 4E ounce. So that is how the definition of the all-in cost has been structured, and we have been utilizing it consistently for years. And then going to basically the value that the byproducts brings to our calculations of costs. Over a period of 5 years, if you look at the graph, we have seen a significant growth in prices of the byproduct metals. You could actually see that now iridium increased by actually 731% over that particular period. Ruthenium increased 1,680 percentage for that particular period, and nickel actually increased by 187%, and copper increased by 198%, and this significant growth in the byproducts resulted in the byproduct credits improving from 850 rand per ounce in 2016 to 4,100 rand per ounce during half year of 2021. So that is actually quite significant if you look at the numbers. You will notice that now this is an indication that now the monetary value in the byproducts offsetting our cost profile. In a graph, you will see also on the positive impact of the byproducts, as in on the pie, or not in the pie, on the bar graphs. This is an indication that now going forward, we have got an advantage as the world is moving to the battery and electrical vehicles, that the demand for our byproduct is actually expected to increase, thereby actually improved the value of the byproduct credits going forward. So that is positive on our side as a segment going to the future. Okay, now I can hand over to Ralph to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Roderick. Hi, everyone. I'm Ralph Lombard, Senior Vice President, Projects. I'm going to take you through two of our company's significant projects for PGMs. K4, which is an unrivaled PGM brownfields project, will target both Merensky and UD2 reefs. We say it's unrivaled because the bulk of the infrastructure is already in place. This includes functional vertical shafts, a functional 103 kiloton concentrator, surface infrastructure, which includes offices, change houses, grout plants, and the refrigeration plant, and many more. Underground, shaft stations and crosscuts are in place, as well as shaft bottom development. We must also note that infrastructure development already started in some of these levels. In terms of the project, I'm glad to say that the project team and the EPCM are on board. Infrastructure and mining early development already commenced, and this will be a major focus over the next 9 months. It's also important to note that we already have an operational management team in place, which will not only assist the project, but will also ensure a smooth transition into the mining activities, which will already start as early as Q2 2022. Most of the designs are on track to be finalized, and with quite a large focus on ESG-friendly solutions. With a 50-year life, it is clear that K4 will play a significant role in the region by ensuring sustainability for the Marikana operations. It will also play a significant role in the local economy by creating close to 4,400 jobs and also creating opportunities for local procurement, SMME development, and skills transfer. With the 50-year life, K4 is a top tier 1 project with a very low capital intensity of only around 350 rands per 4E ounce. The bulk of the 4 billion project capital will be spent over the next 3 years, and that would be spent on ensuring the completion of the surface infrastructure, completion and modification of the shafts and conveyances, as well as the infrastructure development that will ensure commercial production. K4 should reach steady state production by 2030 by producing around 250,000 ounces over a life of at least 33 years, and producing at a very low operating cost of only around 16,000 rands per 4E ounce. In total, 11.5 million ounces will be mined over the 50-year life. With the commodity price and exchange rate assumption shown here, which equates to about just above 24,000 rands above 4E basket, a 6-year payback is expected. This ensures superior return on investment of 3 billion rand net present value, an internal rate of return of 33%. So if I move on to the next project, which is significant, albeit far smaller, is the Klipfontein shallow open pit PGM project. This is a joint venture with Anglo American under the current pool and share arrangement. UG2 will be mined up to a depth of around 45 meters. I'm glad to say that the Section 102 approval was received by the DMRE, so the project is now ready for execution. The 66 million project capital will ensure that 37,400 ounces per annum will be produced from 2022 until 2024 at an average operating cost of just above 8,700 rands per 4E ounce. A total of just above 118,400 ounces will be produced. This will result in a net present value of 740 million and a very good internal rate of return of 70%. This project will also contribute to the regional and economic benefits by creating 174 jobs. The contractor will source labor from the local communities. We will also create procurement and SME development opportunities. Rehabilitation to agricultural farm status will happen at the end of the project. It must be noted that rehabilitation will happen concurrently with mining, which means by the time when the mining is completed, 80% of the rehabilitation already would have been completed. Thank you. With this, I hand over to Jevon and the rest of the sustainability team.
Thanks very much, Rolf. My name is Jevon Martin, and I'm responsible for energy and decarbonisation within the group. It gives me great pleasure today to deep dive into our energy and decarbonisation strategy for our SA PGM operations. The SA PGM operations account for 39% of our group energy demand. And due to their infrastructure and extensive conventional mining methods, electricity is the predominant form of electricity, and as a result, creates a very unique emissions profile where 97% of the emissions stem from Eskom coal-fired and diesel-fired electricity. It's anticipated that this emission profile will decline over time as in line with our PGM production profile, as well as when the renewable energy increases in terms of the national energy mix. We, however, have a number of active decarbonizations currently underway. Similarly to our South African gold operations, we have advanced energy management practices being implemented within these operations, which last year resulted in 60,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions being avoided, primarily through the deployment of digital twins, as well as uniquely developing an energy culture. Due to the emissions profile, one of the strongest levers that we can pull is the deployment of renewable energy. And I'll talk to our solar PV project shortly, but I previously mentioned our wind energy projects, which will enable rapid decarbonization of these particular operations. In terms of the remnant diesel that's used at our mechanized operations, we're exploring the use of battery electric vehicles, as well as setting scope 3 targets for those emissions that are occurred through the third-party processing of our concentrate. Electricity will continue to remain the focus at this operation, so given its predominance in terms of emissions. If I talk quickly to our solar PV projects, given our expanded footprint in the Northwest, we undertook initially a pre-feasibility study and then later a feasibility study into embedded solar PV generation directly into our operations. The studies confirmed the strong rationale around deploying these projects given its decarbonization and commercial potential. The long life assets as well as the associated demand can support easily up to 175 megawatts of solar PV across 3 specific sites. An 80 megawatt project located within the RPM complex, specifically between Bathopele mine and the UG2 and retrofit concentrator. A 65 megawatt project that will be co-located next to the Korea complex that will supply the K4 shaft, the K4 concentrator, the K3 shaft, as well as the K3 concentrator. And lastly, on the eastern portion of our footprint, a 30 megawatt project that will directly inject power into the Roland smelter. The assessment included an extensive land study that confirmed that we have available Sibanye land that can accommodate solar PV, and there were no critical flaws in terms of engineering, environmental, geotechnical, regulatory, social, or security aspects. We also confirmed that we have adequate substations that will allow the solar PV projects to be directly interconnected into our operations. The total cost of the projects will be in the order of 2.5 to 2.8 billion that will be funded through third-party PPA structures. This results in us having minimal capital outlay, access to renewable energy at a 30 to 50% discount to grid-supplied electricity from day one. This generates a significant NPV for these operations, as well as has a significant decarbonization potential. And anticipation of pending carbon taxes for Scope 2 that will also offset these liabilities. We're currently targeting financial close in the first half of 2023 with commercial operation in early 2025. The project schedule is currently being driven by the permitting activities, of which the environmental impact assessment, the rezoning, and the subdivision of land have already been initiated. I'll now hand over to Grant, who will take us through the balance of our environmental considerations. Thank you.
Thanks, Jevon, and good afternoon, and pleased to be with you all. I'm Grant Stewart, and SVP for Environment as part of our sustainability and ESG focus. Our closure vision for the SA PGM operations is an agreed, safe, stable, regional post-closure mining solution that will deliver clean water to local and regional catchments, enabling sustainable post-mining economies and ecosystems. Critical to the success is going to be meaningful stakeholder engagement and collaboration. We are guided by our ESG policy, where we make specific reference to the following: design and implement a closure plan that incorporates concurrent rehabilitation and post-mining land uses in conversation with local communities and government. And a group position paper that states on post-mining socioeconomic sustainability and closure, which sets out our approach towards planning and execution of an integrated responsible mine closure where latent and residual liabilities are well defined and provided for. Integral to aligning to the closure vision over the remaining life of the mine is concurrent rehabilitation. As of 2020, we own some 17,000 hectares of land around our SA PGM operations. We have evolved a footprint reduction program as part of our concurrent rehabilitation drive to sustainably close mining impacts, a vital component of reducing our closure liability. As part of this program, a simple example are the before and after pictures that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, where we have successfully concluded the demolition of the Klipfontein concentrator with rehabilitation of the surface area, reducing our closure liability by some 40 million rand. This is a good example of a collaboration with local communities can achieve a desired outcome with local skills development and deployment, a peripheral benefit. Moreover, we are also looking to leverage our equity interest in DRD Gold and extend the successful tailings retreatment and reclamation and environmental cleanup into our SA PGM operations. Another opportunity that we have well advanced in consultation with the regulator is the opportunity to backfill old pits with tailings. The Marikana pits and West Wets pit currently have a liability of some 1 billion rand. Deposition into these pits will not only see the 1 billion rand closure liability reduce substantially, but will provide an end land use that does not pose a risk to environmental community. An international and independent third party is commissioned on an annual basis to align our closure plans and rehabilitation obligations with the requirements of GNR 1147 for submission to the Department of Mineral Energy and Resources. A closure report per operation is completed and includes the unscheduled and scheduled closure costs for each mining operation at site level. This report is used for external auditing purposes and eventually for submission to the DMRE. We have set aside some 4.7 billion rand, which is the unscheduled closure liability for the management, remediation and rehabilitation of the environmental impacts on our SA PGM footprint. These are independently reviewed and adjusted annually as mining occurs and as mining plans develop. The unscheduled closure liability of Marikana, with a life of some 20 years plus, is some 1.9 billion rand, with Kroondal and SRPM 1.4 and 1.2 billion rand respectively. The unscheduled liability is funded through a combination of trust and guarantees, or cash in trust and guarantees, and the cash contributions are made annually to a dedicated rehabilitation trust over the planned life of the operations. Any shortfalls in closure provisions at the end of the period are funded by guarantees. These provisions serve to assure the DMRE that the mine will enable or be enabled to fund the rehabilitation and cost in accordance with our closure plan. Thanks. Since 1965, there have been some 120 reported failures of tailings facilities with some 2,300 fatalities and significant environmental damage. Substantial advancements have, however, been made in the past decade in technologies and engineering practices in design, assessment and management of tailings storage facilities. We are very cognizant of our obligations to ensure that we mine responsibly and minimize our harm to the planet. This is very evident when it comes to the way we manage tailings and hence our very strong group tailings governance framework. As a member of the ICMM, we are committed to implementing a group tailings management system in alignment with the group industry standard for tailings management. The global standard stipulates increased accountability to owners with an elevation of accountability to the board and executive committee. Further, we have committed to comply with all the requirements of the global standard by the 5th of August 2023. The SA PGM operations have 23 tailings storage facilities, of which 21 are classified as having a high hazard rating in accordance with SANS 10286. 24% of these facilities are dormant, 2 of which are classified as having a and 2 of which are classified as having a medium hazard. We intend to be fully compliant by 2023 to all TSFs, regardless of the consequence classification. We are in the process of confirming the classification of all facilities in alignment with the global standard consequence classification matrix. We have added a tailings module to our Pivot platform, which is a management reporting tool, and any non-conformances against the group tailings management standard or global industry standard conformance roadmap are identified, tracked, managed, and closed out. The establishment of the SA PGM Tailings Working Group has raised risk awareness and created greater TSF management understanding in the operating entities. A good working relationship has encouraged operating entities to escalate tailings issues to the VP Tailings Engineering for resolution. Outstanding matters are now receiving a higher level of attention, reducing overall tailings risk. During the balance of this year, we'll be rolling out an internationally recognized best practice tailings management technology, currently used by 4 members of the ICMM, including Rio Tinto. This technology will enable improved and proactive risk identification, management, and mitigation across the PGM footprint. The module will include deformation monitoring and side slopes by satellite. All data points are geo-referenced, allowing for integration of environmental and social data, providing additional business opportunities for managing and reporting against our ESG requirements. Implementation of this module will assist in closing several gaps with the GISTM requirements. Thanks. Our Marikana, Rustenburg and Kroondal operations are located in an area which is recognized as water-constrained area. The operations are dependent on Rand Water Board, the Rustenburg Local Municipality and Rustenburg Water Services for approximately 65% of their total water demand. With a growing demand for water in the region due to a growing population, a backlog of augmentation and water security schemes by local authorities and unpredictable weather patterns, it is important more so than ever before to design and implement measures to improve the water security for production purposes. Through effective implementation of such measures, we will reduce our impact on surrounding water resources and improve water security in the region over the longer term for the benefit of our operations, those who depend on our operations, as well as the surrounding communities. Securing and protecting local water resources will also serve the region post the closure of the operations. We are therefore focused on a water security strategy to secure and sustain safe operations. There are a number of focus areas that drive our security strategy, one of which is the effective and smart continuous monitoring. The flow technology that we have decentralized across all of our sites enables a defined and consistent approach to the site level accounting, which is fundamental to adequately capturing a diverse range of operational contexts, water practices, risks, opportunities, and management responses, which occur across our operational footprint. This technology is the foundation for accurate and consistent external reporting for the minimum commitments. Since the implementation of this technology in 2016, we've expanded the system to include more than 400 monitoring sites across our operations. Through the successful implementation of this strategy, we have managed to reduce our reliance on the integrated Volrosa system by some 18% in 2020 when compared to 2018. Other demonstrable progress in water security strategies include the integrated Marikana water balance across our SA PGM footprint, which has introduced a great deal of flexibility and enabled the water to be transferred from the water-rich areas during the wet season to storage areas and water areas known to be water stressed. The Pandora pipeline scheme has enabled the Marikana operations to transfer up to 6 megalitres of water a day from the eastern wet operations to the Korea operations. Water harvesting. This has allowed us to access more than 1,000 megalitres of capacity through the utilisation of old open cast pits and cleaning up the processed water dams. This 1,000 megalitres is able to sustain the SA PGM operations for more than 2 weeks without any other potable water supply. A focus on tailings and density management and control with a target of 1.6 tonnes per cube by 2025. That is an optimal tailings density management and maintenance of our tailings facility that we are aiming to achieve. We recognise the fact that more than 50% of the water lost over the tailings facility due to seepage, evaporation and initial interstitial lockup is a critical success factor to our water security strategy. As part of our drive to water security and water independence and responsible water management, we have also climbed on board and have a clear target and support transparent disclosure, which is why we have also reported and joined the water reporting to the CDP. But as we all know, that meaningful change can only happen through collaboration. So Thabisile, over to you.
Thank you, Grant. My name is Thabisile Phumo. I'm Head of Stakeholder Relations and Community Development. As a company, we are making real changes to transform and create value for all our stakeholders. Reflecting on empowerment structures. At Marikana, we've had to restructure the empowerment structure because the previous one was non-beneficial and had substantial debt burden. The new sustainable BEE financing structure provides for immediate access to distributable cash flow and ongoing transfer of tangible value to the beneficiaries. This enables us to secure the social license to operate for these operations. We recognize the need for social relief, and to that extent, we have unlocked it via our BEE structures and employee profit share scheme. We are pleased to advise that we have paid 145 million to the Rustenburg BEE structure and 64 million to employees via the profit share scheme since the acquisition. In Marikana, we've paid 91 million to the empowerment structures and 521 million to Marikana employees via the ESOP for the 2020 year. It is important that we continue to invest in these operations so that we can increase their life of mine and also secure jobs. To that extent, at steady state, K4 and Klipfontein will employ 4,500 people at steady state. We continue to contribute to the fiscus and social imperatives by paying royalties and taxes, and in the first half of 2021, we have paid 10.3 billion. We continue to deliver on social and labor plan programs for each of the mining licenses. Our employee volunteering scheme, where we partner with our employees to unlock value, ensures that we continue to create value in areas where they live. We also continue to sponsor universities, bursaries, and provide for learnerships for the youth in all our operating environment. Across the PGM segment, we have contributed to close to 80 social and labor plan programs in the areas of skills development, infrastructure development, and income generating projects. In the health sector, we have partnered with the Northwest Province Department of Health to improve health services. And in this case, We are involved in the construction of clinics, forensic mortuaries, and we have also contributed mobile clinics so that they can access areas that are far from social services. In the areas of education, we have partnered with the Northwest Basic Department of Education, where we have rolled out early childhood development programs comprising the upgrade of facilities, teacher training, learning infrastructure, and material. We have constructed new schools and continue to be involved in the extensions of several schools so that we can improve the quality of learning. The key issue that everyone is engaging around in Marikana is what we have launched earlier in the year, which is called the Marikana Renewal. The Marikana Renewal focuses on honoring, engaging, and creating a new reality in Marikana in partnership with stakeholders so that we can ensure that we honor the legacy of Marikana and facilitate healing for families and the injured. We pursue justice and restitution for the affected and impacted. It became evident when we were working on this aspect that you cannot do healing and restitution without looking at issues of social redress. To that extent, we are working together with various partners, government included, to ensure social redress through the delivery of social infrastructure that benefits communities. We are one of the contributors to the district development model and continue to promote, together with other stakeholders, the development of alternative economic streams in the region that can continue to create jobs during and post the life of mine of our operations. And that is how, as a company, we are creating superior value for stakeholders in the Northwest environment. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Thabisile, and also to Davy and the rest of the team for those extensive presentations and deep dive into our operations. I think to bring it all to a conclusion, and certainly it is not my intention to repeat a lot of what has been said, but just to zoom through some of the key points that hopefully you have been left with from the discussions today. These are quality world-class assets. They are contiguous in nature, which has really allowed us to realize and achieve the synergies that we set out to achieve, and has reset the cost base of these operations. They are competitive second and third cost quartile operations, which has set them up well for sustainability. These are long life assets. Although we commenced the life of them in a downturn period of the PGM markets, where it was difficult to justify capital, they have the resource base to sustain not only current production, but the production that the market requires for an extended period of time. And we are developing the strategies as to how best and most responsibly realize that value and long life for the value of all of our stakeholders. We have a very competitive position in terms of the processing capacity that we have. We have spare capacity in our refining facilities, and that certainly provides optionality not only to assist third parties, but also in terms of our own growth plans. Many of our capital projects do not require extensive capital to be spent on processing. Similar to, as we mentioned, our strategy has been very much about integrating our business with our customers, with our supply chains. Likewise, as you have heard today, we very much focus on integrating our business with the surrounding communities in which we operate and the environment within which our mines are created, ultimately with an objective of leaving a legacy when we leave one day that is better than when we started. I think we've demonstrated that we managed to very successfully execute our entry into the PGMs, to execute our growth strategy. We have already created significant value for our stakeholders through these operations and look forward to continuing to do so for a further 20 years to come. And with that, once again, thank you to the team for the presentations, and we would look forward to taking any questions that you may have. Thank you.